I'm lucky I just recorded Carla too. So, all right. So we watched you like a week ago, wasn't it? So I apologize.
Last Tuesday.
It's been a while, but this was your lesson plan, so I'm sure that you remember all of this stuff because it was super nerve-wracking, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so how do you think the lesson as a whole went?
I didn't feel great about it. I felt like I struggle with pacing because there's times when I feel like you're going too slow, they're picking it up, but then I'm realizing it's my high kids that are picking it up and I'm going too slow for them.
Right, so asking targeted questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And knowing that you were focusing on questioning, I think I should have put more focus into writing down questions in advance so that they were more, I was better prepared that I could have higher level questions.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
And I could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so the planning piece, so that would, that goes to like standard, I believe it's 3. No, that's learning environments, content knowledge. I should have these committed to memory.
Yeah.
I think it is instructional strategies.
Is that part of questioning?
Here it is, instructional planning standard 6.
Okay.
Okay, so the first parts of instructional planning is really easy because it says, are you using the core? Well, yeah, you are. Individual and collaborative selects and creates learning experiences that are appropriate for reaching a variety of learners. So we had talked about that, and when we first met, we said Salvador would probably struggle with it, Whitney, and then Alex, we were kind of, is that right? We were kind of wondering about. So was the lesson plan geared towards them, but then was it also geared towards some of your high kids too?
Yeah.
And so finding entry points for each of those kids.
Exactly. So
I think you had a variety of materials because you went from the board, you did some questioning individually. I think you're right in terms of nailing it for those targeted kids is asking the questions in advance, knowing who you're going to ask them to. Because I saw throughout the lesson that you were asking questions. You did some really good choral responses. You did some partner turn and talks, and they were quick, so the pacing there was good. I apologize.
You're fine.
So the pacing there was good. And then pretty soon as the lesson rolled out, there were more open-ended questions asked that turned into assessment questions.
Yes. I have water. Thank you though.
That's bad. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You bring tears to
Are
my
you
eyes.
teaching? Are you
So, planning those questions and knowing who you're going to ask those questions to. Because when you look at this, and I'm going to have you watch this.
Oh, great.
Here's Salvador. Here's Whitney. And Alex is over here.
That's Bridget. Oh no, that's Whitney. My bad.
Yeah, Bridget. That's Bridget.
Yeah, my bad.
All right, there's Whitney. And it was amazing to me that Alex did as well as he did. When I was filming and I was in there live, and when he was doing his independent work, he was actually doing really well.
Yeah.
But if you watch the video, when I watched it a second time, he was, for the majority of the time, looking out the door. And I thought, how did he pick up any of that? But yet, you asked Whitney a couple of questions, but Salvador wasn't engaged at all.
No.
And so I think you're right, being really conscious of that and planning those questions in advance is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So let's watch this. I had a question on, as it was rolling out. Was this a review lesson?
We've talked about plural nouns before.
Okay.
So yes, like ongoing I think is better than review.
Okay.
Because we had learned the rules before, and like when a word ends in, because I forget.
CH.
Exactly. We talked about that special rule. We talked about when we add ES. So we've had lessons before that were just adding S's to words. We had lessons before that were just adding ES to words.
And so now it's all together and mixed. Oh, okay.
And we had lessons before on irregular.
Okay.
So everything in this lesson they'd heard before, but it was a matter of now we're making those decisions for ourselves.
Gotcha. Okay, and that actually clears up a lot of misconception. I should have asked you that during our planning meeting, our initial meeting, because when I was watching it, it sounded reviewish. And then I thought, well, so why are we spending so much time on this if they've already done it? So then I couldn't tell, are you trying to solidify the rules which you had those 5 rules,
Yeah.
4 rules. Look at the word, look at the ending sound and stuff. And or is this just a concept review? That makes more sense. So
Okay.
that was my fault. I should have asked better questions there. So that being said, maybe the next time when you
Yeah.
actually turn in lessons, we could be a little more specific about that. But I really like I said, you had every behavior that students were supposed to be doing, and they followed your instruction well. I would say at any given time during your lesson, you had more than 90% of engagement. Again, the 3 target kids we were
Yeah.
looking at, if we were just to look at their engagement rates, that would dump.
Yeah.
Big time. So they were probably your 10% of the 90% when they weren't engaged. And it's not will, it's definitely skill. Although Salvador kind of checks out, and there were times
Yeah.
when Whitney checks out. So
Yeah.
I wasn't so convinced that it wasn't skill. I thought it was funny at the end when Salvador, when you had them do their self-assessment, did you notice what he gave himself?
I'm guessing really high.
I got it. And he was struggling, not with adding S's, not with adding the ES.
Uh-huh.
It was those irregular ones.
Yeah.
The children, he said child's.
Mm-hmm.
So he added the S. So he understood the rule.
Mm-hmm.
When I said, okay, this is a really tricky one. I said, so remember if you've seen this word before, we talked about it at the beginning of the lesson. He listened and he thought a minute, so he put children's.
Mm.
So I thought that was great. And I that works. And then it was right at that time when he was finishing that, you called him back to the rug, and that's when he was like,
I got it.
Good. Ms. Hamilton said I was good. So let's watch this. Let me look at this. Oh. And I'm actually going to fast forward it. A couple of things that I really like that you did is watch your body language and think of a kid like Salvador that has yellow
two
issues.
words. And there's only one little difference between the 2 words. And I want you to think really hard in your head what the difference is. Now, I know that I have some of the smartest second graders in here, so you're going to know the answer. Should you yell it out?
Great
Even
reviewing
if
your
it's obvious, you
expectations.
think everyone in the class knows the answer. No, this is a secret answer. You're going to keep it in your head until I ask you to share, okay? So even if you know the answer right away, you're not going to whisper it, you're not going to shout it out, you're going to keep it in your head like a trap. Are you ready?
Do you do that on purpose, or is that just how you talk? Do you talk with your hands?
I think I talk with my hands a lot, but I do, realizing that lots of them, they need the visuals to catch on to what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I try
so
to.
that's great, because you didn't have any kind of visual cues up there, but it was them needing to watch you and listen to direction,
Yeah.
and so you brought your attention to yourself, which I thought was great. The other thing that you do so remarkably well is your positive praise ratio is outstanding, and the
Okay.
cueing that you use, I like how Salvador, I like how da-da-da-da-da. In fact, if there's anything that I would give you advice on, it's tighten it up a little bit.
Okay.
Take points away. I don't know if that goes along with the CW fit rules. I don't know if
Oh,
you're allowed
yeah,
to take
yeah.
points away. But most of the time I bet you would have 95% of the kids with you. It was Alex that would sometimes not be with you. It was Daniel, and we get his circumstances, a little bit. But you didn't have to do a whole lot of not negative reinforcement, but cueing to get them back on track. Other
Yeah.
than Alex, I don't know what world he was in. Is that typical?
It kind of varies on the day, and I noticed what you noticed as well, is that lots of times I'll think he's not paying attention, and I'll do some sort of get with me, and then he always knows the answer.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of been trying to watch him more closely, because obviously I want him on task and I want him with me.
But if he gets
if he's picking it up and it's not distracting others, then I'm kind of like, do your
Yeah,
thing.
because I agree with you, because I don't know what was so intriguing out the hallway, but he looked over there the whole time. It was funny, but like I said, he got it. So, but your cueing and your pacing, I think, is outstanding. I like when you have them do the turn and talks that it's 5 seconds and you literally count down. The thing to make sure only you know this is if your focus kids are Whitney and Salvador,
Yes.
and you're doing the 5 countdown, you didn't move too far away from being in front of the classroom.
No.
And although I couldn't follow your eyes, so I couldn't tell if maybe you were honed in on what they were saying or not. So that's kind of a you
I
thing.
do try to shift it, and now that I'm looking at it, Whitney and Hinkley have switched spots.
Oh, good.
So now, because I was noticing that Whitney and Salvador would turn to each other to partner talking,
You're too focused kids. So
Who knows
how
what
well
they're
that would
talking But so now she's around Kaylee, who's really high, and April, who's right on level.
Okay.
So that is facilitating a little bit better discussion. And Salvador is working on. Because the problem, and I know this is horrible, but the problem with him is if I move him up, he's so easily distracted. You know what I mean? I have to separate him and Daniel because they have their little quirks that...
they can be distracting to everybody else. Because it's...
And so, not that I'm like, well, Salvador can ruin himself, but I don't want it to be like the chain effect of everyone.
Right.
Well,
and even if you just pull this group of desks this way so that you can kind of get around there more often, because I noticed that you were kind of trapped by geography a little bit. I wish there was a way to move your computer, because you're just so locked into that. There is that app on the iPad that Lisa taught us that we need to be a little more proficient with. We need to practice around with that. But anyway, so your positive cueing is outstanding. Your body language and finding entry points so that they have visual cues to hone in on you. I think that's great. So I can't remember what the next.
Got his eyes on me and his detective ears on.
Yeah, I love that.
Here we go. Here are the 2 words, and we're listening for the one difference between the words, Damien. Pencil. Pencils. Awesome. Wow. Hands went up in the air and we didn't say a word. I'll say it one more time in case anyone is thinking, I'm not quite sure. You can check your answer in your head. Again, don't shut out. Pencil.
I'm going to fast forward it to where you introduce the learning target.
Okay.
And that was the stupid phone call. Isn't that terrible? Here you go, tall lady.
I usually call you that.
We're going to be talking about singular and
That's what you said.
And let's read our learning targets so we know exactly what we're looking for together. I want to hear your best reading voices, okay? Ready? Begin. I can make any singular noun plural. I will show I can do this by changing singular nouns I am given into plural nouns, while keeping in mind the rules for how to make plural nouns. And lucky my target is on.
Okay, talk to me about your target.
I really struggle with targets.
Okay.
Every time we have a training on them, I see them being used in the classroom videos, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't get them because I feel like when I include all the things like what they need to look for to know if they get it and what we're actually doing, then it gets super wordy like that.
Right, absolutely.
And like they're hard words for them to read, but like they singular and plural, we talk about what those mean. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it got a little wordy when you and I pre-briefed. I read that and I was like, that is a beautiful learning target because it. Are you timing me? That's a beautiful learning target because you had your target and then you had your performance of understanding. Here was what I would do.
Okay.
So you have your learning target. This is like what they need to know. Okay.
Yes.
Singular noun and plural noun. Okay?
Yes.
So then think about your lesson. Did they learn how to change a singular noun into a plural noun?
Yes.
Yes. How did they learn how to do that?
By following the rules.
By following the rules. Okay. So I can make any singular noun plural by following the rules. And then what did they have to do? Did they just complete that worksheet or do they ever have to?
For this one, it was the completion of the worksheet.
Okay.
Sometimes it's like share with a buddy the definition.
Well, yeah, and
like
you
that.
definitely had by sharing my thinking.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so when you look at a success criterion performance of understanding, it's about what do they need to do, make, say, or write.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all four of them at the same time. Okay. So in this case, it might just be speaking it. So I can make any singular noun plural by adding the correct or by paying attention to the correct ending. And following the rules. And then that's it, because that is student-friendly language. This isn't student-friendly language. I would say that's probably a little too wordy, and you could tell that after you were like,
and that's
even you were tripping over, you're like,
I'm like,
So for second grade, they need to be short, sweet, and simple, for sure. This would be a great target for the upper grades if they were working on like some sort of a comprehension piece, because they can read all of that. But if you do have a learning target that's really wordy, I would unpack that.
Okay.
So I would say, okay, boys and girls, that's a lot of words, and it sounds like we're going to do a lot of things. What we are going to do is, I wish I had because what's on your board is different than what's
Yeah.
here. So I would unpack what you said the first time. You said I
Yeah.
can make a singular noun plural, and then by following the rules of, and then just say by following the rules, and so unpack it, and then let them
Okay.
know what exactly it is. What are the verbs that they're looking at?
Okay.
So and those verbs are going to lead you to the success criteria.
Okay.
So I would parse that back to 2 sentences. I can make singular nouns plurals.
They're two
I can,
really long sentences.
right. Don't make them too long sentences. I can make singular noun plural.
Okay.
Singular nouns plural. And you could even focus on, at the end of it, you really wanted them to learn about the weird endings and the tricky words,
Yeah.
the irregular words. So I can make irregular words, irregular nouns plural, and then period. I know the 5 rules to follow when changing singular nouns to plural.
Okay.
That's much more second grade friendly.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
yeah.
yeah, I don't want, because the performance of understanding and all of that wordiness, it gets convoluted, especially for a second grader. That's for you, so that you know what you need to look for in their work.
Well, see, and that's what I've struggled with, is that it seems like, well, if the students don't know exactly how they're going to know if they're successful, then it's not a learning target. And it's like, well,
No,
they're second graders. They
There's-
never know if they're successful.
Their success criteria is whether or not they can follow that checklist. So
Okay.
the other thing that I would do, and that's an adjustment that I'd written in my notes, was I would have those rules up, and I don't know if that was a review of the rules. You said that they had learned them before.
Yeah.
I'd have them up on a chart separately over here and say,
Okay.
okay, so what's our first step? That way you could refer back to it for, the Alexes that
yeah.
aren't, the Daniels who are all over the place, and say, what's the first rule? Now repeat it to me, repeat it to your partner, to go, and just keep that pacing going like that.
Yeah.
Does that help? Does
Totally.
that help kind of,
Totally.
because here's the thing about coaching you, is that you've got, generally you've got everything in place. You've got all of the management pieces in place, you know your content, you know how to deliver. Now it's just a couple of refinements that's going to take you from good to great. And that's what I expect
That's what I want.
from you. So just making those little refinements in, having a poster over here so that you're always having a visual cue of those rules. And then you have those rules up so that when they're writing, they're constantly looking at it. The last thing that I wanted to chat with you about in the delivery of the lesson was your advanced kids. So when you're thinking of, who did you say? Hinkley's kind of a high kid. Who else is there?
She's not very
She's
high.
a high level kid.
Yeah. Kaylee M is really high. Carla, Jonathan, Samara.
Samara, yeah, she's
very high.
She's very high. She's a great kid.
Yeah.
So those kids blew through that worksheet really quick.
Oh yeah.
One of the things, and I know again it's teaching to the Salvadors and then teaching to the Samaras, have something on hand. And the one thing that I thought about was having them get a book or finding those plural nouns in text.
That's a good idea.
And having them either highlight it or put a post-it under it so that they can identify, and maybe even they get a regular add S, and they highlight it as a 1. The 2 is they had those CH, SH, whatevers, and they had to add ES, or the author had to add ES, and then irregular plural nouns that they identify in text. So that, that takes a little more planning, but that'd be a really good way to get them off of a practice worksheet, which they had already gotten, and you know that they already have it, and get them into text and having them identify.
Well, no, that's a great idea, because all of our grammar rules they're going to see in their text. So that could be their fast finisher for...
Right. Well, and then that
any
can
of
be
these grammar
a review. When you introduce the next concept, you could take your read out loud book. I don't know what book you're reading, but you could actually photocopy maybe one and scan it in, or pull up some sort of an excerpt from it and read it out loud before you do your read aloud. Say, you know what, boys and girls, I was noticing that I found a bunch of plural nouns. Check out what this author does, and then you can make that connection from why am I learning this, and it's just all in this vacuum, to, oh, when I read, here it is.
Yeah. I really like that one. So make sure
Find out it.
don't plan on my brain remembering it.
Every once in a while I come up with it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to email this.
Okay.
This video. And what I want you to do is, remember that activity that we did last year where you had to track your questions? I want you to watch your questioning, because the first part, it looked really good. And then the second part, all of a sudden there were a lot of questions being asked, a lot. And almost some of them were rhetorical. You weren't really expecting an answer back. And I know that part of that was just the flow of the lesson, and I'm in there and there was a lot of pressure. So no big deal. That's why I'm not worried about that, because I know with the right amount of planning and you writing them down, that won't be a problem. I want you to track that though. I want you to write down whether it was an open question, an assessment question, or engagement question. Anytime you had them turn to their partner, that was great. That was an engagement request. When you asked open questions, you would ask the question as an open, which we know isn't effective, and then you would say Samara, or then you would say Salvador, or then you would say, that all of a sudden turns it from an open question for everybody to maybe take responsibility for to an assessment question where only one kid has to do it. If they understood the rules well, and they had really short sentences, then you could say, what's our next step, class? And then you'd give the cue to respond out loud, and then what would we do? And then and then it would become more engagement requests overall than individually asking questions.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
So I'll email this to you as a YouTube link. So if you do it at school, remember you have to sign into the to the iBoss thing. Okay, so going back to, and I haven't put anything to numbers, and I haven't done all of the narrative yet, but I think as you look at it, you pointed out that, with planning and asking the right kinds of questions. So you use various methods, but I think in here this would be a place to add your questioning strategies and really refine that and be really targeted about what is it that I want Salvador to take away from this. Do I need him to know all of those irregular words like children's, or do I need him to know how to add S and ES and when to? For Salvador, I think if he knows when to recognize it and add it, that's great. Children's, I think he'll get that at some point with a lot of reading, which we know he doesn't do.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And this provides opportunities for creative work, that idea of getting them into text and finding where authors have used those plural nouns and stuff. I think that would be helpful. So if I were to venture a guess, you're going to be in here in terms of overall. I mean, there were a couple, and this one, like these classroom management strategies, the variety that you use, I would put you over here in highly effective. I mean, and you could do that for kicks, but doing the individual and student, whole class, praise and negative ratio, you're like 13 to 1. I think you corrected Daniel once and you corrected Damien once, and that was it. But overall, your class is really well behaved. So, that would be something that some of these standards I would put you over here on. So.
Okay.
Other than that, I think just those couple of tweaks, getting those kids to stretch a little bit more, and then breaking down those targets so that they are more finite and more manageable and easier for you to assess whether or not they got it. So does Salvador know those 5 rules? Or does he just plunk an S down at the end of everything? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what's most important is that he knows how to access those rules. Is that he knows, okay, I might not know whether or not to add S or ES or whether it's irregular, but here are some guiding principles that will help me. And if he knows to refer back to that list all the time in his writing, in his reading, then that's going to be helpful. So that's going to be your learning target. That's your ending long-term assessment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Way to go, sister.
Awesome, thanks. It's really positive.
I try to be. I'll email this to you. It's got a download to YouTube. I haven't downloaded it yet to YouTube,
okay.
But so probably tomorrow I'll do that.
Do you have those questioning sheets? I think
it will be in your inbox.
Okay, I was like, I have it in my binder somewhere.
I
think.
I haven't, so I'll email it to you. Okay. I will get you the final document with all of it and your